Have you ever looked at a map of our world and felt a deep, unsettling chill when your eyes drift to the very bottom, to that vast, white emptiness that covers an entire continent? Antarctica. We are told it is a land of eternal ice, a desolate wasteland of blizzards and unbearable cold, the last truly untamed place on Earth. A continent so hostile that no human has ever made it a permanent home. That is the story we are in school. A simple story, a safe story. But what if it isn't the true story? What if that blank, white space on the map is not empty, but is in fact a veil, a curtain drawn over the greatest secret in human history? What if the ice, miles deep, is not just a tomb for a forgotten geology, but a prison for a you were never, ever meant to know? Imagine for a moment that this frozen continent was not always frozen. Imagine for a moment that this frozen continent was not always frozen. Imagine a land of green valleys, a land capable of supporting not just life, but a civilization. A civilization so advanced that its knowledge has haunted the edges of our own history for centuries, dismissed as myth, but refusing to disappear. Now, ask yourself, what could possibly be so terrifying about a lost ancient civilization that it would need to be hidden from all of us? What truth is buried beneath that ice that would require the world's most powerful nations to come together? Not in a spirit of scientific cooperation, but in a pact of absolute secrecy, a pact to keep the world from ever discovering what truly lies at the South Pole. Tonight, we drift together into the heart of that white desert. We will peel back the layers of ice and time, and we will ask the questions that have been silenced for generations. Because the mystery of ancient Antarctica is not about a lost land. It is about a lost chapter of our own story. A chapter that someone, somewhere, went to extraordinary lengths to tear from the books of history. And most frightening part is, they may have almost succeeded. To begin this journey, we must first understand the official narrative. The one you can find in any textbook or encyclopedia. It's a clean, logical, and comfortably distant story. We are told that Antarctica was once part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, nestled alongside South America, Africa, India, and Australia. In this ancient time, more than 100 million years ago, the climate was warm and the continent was covered in lush rainforests, teeming with dinosaurs and strange, unfamiliar life. Then, slowly, over an immense stretch of geological time, the continents drifted apart. Antarctica was left stranded at the bottom of the world, isolated and alone. As its position shifted to the South Pole, a gradual, creeping cold began to take hold. The green forests withered, the rivers slowed, and ice began to form. A thin sheet at first, then a creeping glacier, until the entire landmass was crushed beneath a frozen shell, miles thick. This process, they tell us, was complete millions of years before the first humans ever walked the Earth. According to this official history, the continent remained a myth, a hypothetical terra australis incognita, or unknown southern land, for thousands of years. It wasn't until 1820 that human eyes first laid sight on its icy shores. From that moment on, it has been a land for explorers, scientists, and heroes battling the elements. A place of pure, untouched nature. And to protect this pristine wilderness, in 1959, at the height of the Cold War, the world's most powerful nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. This treaty set the continent aside as a scientific preserve, banned military activity, and guaranteed freedom of scientific investigation. It's presented as a triumph of international cooperation, a beacon of peace in a divided world. A beautiful story, isn't it? A story that makes sense. A story that leaves no room for uncomfortable questions. But it is in those comfortable silences, in the gaps between the neat timelines, that the real story begins to stir. If Antarctica is a land of peace and science, why is access so strictly controlled? Why do you need special permits and undergo intense scrutiny just to visit? Are there vast areas designated as no-fly zones, where not even scientific flights are permitted without special clearance? Why does a continent supposedly dedicated to transparent research operate under a veil of such deep military and governmental oversight? The official answers are always practical: to protect the fragile environment, to ensure safety in a hostile land. But the feeling persists, a cold whisper in the back of the mind, that these are not just regulations, they are barriers. They are not designed to protect the ice for us, but to protect us from what lies beneath the ice. Have you ever wondered why every major world power, from the United States and Russia to China and the nations of Europe, maintains a heavy and costly presence on a continent with no apparent strategy? C, or economic value. They build massive, technologically advanced bases, staffed by military personnel, operating under the guise of scientific research. What kind of science requires this level of secrecy and security? What are they really looking for in the ice and in the rock beneath? Perhaps the Antarctic Treaty was not a symbol of peace at all. Perhaps it was the most successful and encompassing cover-up in human history. A global agreement to quarantine an entire continent, to lock away a truth so profound and so disruptive that the world's greatest rivals would choose to become partners in hiding it. The question is no longer what happened in Antarctica millions of years ago. The question is, what did they find? What discovery could be so earth-shattering that it requires a global conspiracy of silence to maintain? And who, or what, are they so afraid of us finding? The neat, clean story of a frozen wasteland begins to crack, and through those cracks, a far older and more terrifying reality begins to leak out. A reality that begins not with ice, but with ancient maps. History, as we know it, is a fragile thing, built upon surviving texts and artifacts. What happens when an artifact appears that simply should not exist? An object that rips a hole in the official timeline and presents us with a level of knowledge that seems utterly impossible for its time. In 1929, in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a discovery was made that would send shockwaves through the world of cartography and history. It was a map drawn on a gazelle skin parchment, dated to the year 1513. It was signed by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. On the surface, it was a masterpiece of 16th century map-making, showing that of Europe, North Africa, and Brazil with remarkable accuracy. But as scholars looked closer, a chilling, impossible detail emerged. A portion of the map, there was a coastline, a landmass that looked eerily like the coast of Antarctica. Let that sink in for a moment. A map from 1513, nearly 300 years before Antarctica was officially discovered, appears to show the continent's northern coast. But the mystery deepens, becoming something far more unsettling. The coastline shown on the Piri Reis map is not the ice-choked shore we know today. It is a coastline free of ice. It shows river mouths, bays, and a landscape that could only exist if the continent were not buried under a 2-mile thick glacier. According to modern geology, the last time Antarctica's coast was in this ice-free condition was, at the very least, over 6,000 years ago, and most scientists would say it has been frozen for millions of years. So how could a 16th century Turkish admiral possibly have known what it looked like? The official explanations from mainstream historians are often dismissive. They claim it is a crude representation of the South American coast, bent eastward to fit on the parchment. They say it's a coincidence, a fantasy, a cartographic error. But Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map explaining his sources. He stated that he compiled his map from about 20 other charts, including some ancient ones that dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and even earlier. He wrote that some of his source maps had been drawn by people who had sailed in the ancient seas, and that he had used them to create this composite view of the world. He was not inventing, he was copying. This raises a terrifying possibility. What if Piri Reis was telling the truth? What if he had in his possession maps from a long-forgotten era, maps created by a civilization with the ability to chart the globe with incredible precision? A civilization that knew the world when Antarctica was green. Where would such maps have come from? The legendary Library of Alexandria is one candidate, a place where the accumulated knowledge of the ancient world was stored before it was tragically burned and lost to history. But what if some of those scrolls, some of those precious maps, survived? What if they were passed down in secret, from scholar to scholar, until they ended up in the hands of an Ottoman admiral in the 16th century? The existence of the Piri Reis map is not a theory. It is a fact. It sits in a museum, a physical object that defies our understanding of the past. It suggests that our history is incomplete, that there are entire chapters, entire seafaring civilizations that have been wiped from our collective memory. It whispers of a time when the world was known, explored, and mapped by people we have no record of. And it screams a single deafening question. If they knew what Antarctica looked like without its ice, what else did they know? And who were they? The map is not the end of the mystery. It is only the beginning. It is the first clue that the pristine white continent at the bottom of our world is not a blank slate, but a slate that has been wiped clean. If the Piri Reis map was a single unsettling anomaly, it could perhaps be dismissed. An enigma, a historical curiosity, but not proof of a deeper, hidden history. But it is not. It is one piece of a much larger and far more disturbing puzzle. Just a few years after Piri Reis created his chart, another map appeared, one that is in many ways even more impossible. In 1531, the French cartographer and mathematician Oronce Finet, also known as Oronces Phineus, published a world map that is nothing short of breathtaking in its implications. And there, at the bottom of the world, sits Antarctica. But this is not a vague or distorted coastline. The Oronces Phineus map depicts the entire continent, a vast landmass centered roughly on the South Pole, with a shape that is shockingly accurate to what we know today from modern seismic and radar surveys of the land beneath the ice. The map shows mountain ranges and coastlines with distinct features. Disturbingly, it shows rivers flowing from the interior mountains out to the sea. rivers, on a continent we are told has been a frozen wasteland for millions of years. There are no significant surface rivers in Antarctica today. They are all buried under miles of ice. For Orontius Finus to draw them in 1509, he would have needed knowledge that simply did not exist. He would have needed to see the continent without its icy tomb. Where did this information come from? Like Piri Reis, Phineas was a respected scholar, not a fantasist. He was the chair of mathematics at the Royal College in Paris. He was known for his scientific mind. It is highly unlikely that he simply invented this detailed geography out of thin air. The logical conclusion, however terrifying, is the same as with the Piri Reis map. He must have been working from source maps. Ancient, impossibly accurate source maps that preserved a vision of the world from a time when Antarctica was temperate, a time before the Great Freezing. Think about what this truly means. It means that sometime in the distant past, long before the rise of any known civilization in our history books, someone had the technology and the ability to accurately map an entire continent. They knew its shape, its mountains, its rivers. This implies not just exploration, but advanced science. It implies a global seafaring culture with a knowledge of longitude, a problem that would vex European sailors for another 250 years after Phineas. The Phineas map is a ghost from a lost world. It sits in stark contradiction to everything we are taught about the slow, linear progress of human civilization. It suggests that we are not the pinnacle of knowledge, but perhaps the survivors of a great amnesia, a species that has forgotten a golden age of its own past. And still, the trail of impossible maps does not end there. It gets even stranger. It pulls us deeper into the certainty that something is profoundly wrong with our recorded history. In 1737, more than 2 centuries after Phineas, another French cartographer named Philippe Bouache published a map of Antarctica. Bouache was a member of the French Academy of Sciences, a serious and respected geographer. His map is, in some ways, the most shocking of all. Because his map doesn't just show an ice-free Antarctica, it shows something that humanity would not officially confirm until the International Geophysical Year, 1958. Philippe Bouache's map depicts Antarctica not as a single landmass, but as 2 separate large islands, divided by a clear sea channel that runs right through the middle of the continent. For centuries, this was dismissed as a bizarre error, a flight of fancy. How could Antarctica be 2 islands? But in 1958, after years of seismic surveys that penetrated the miles-thick ice sheet, scientists made a stunning discovery. Beneath the ice, Antarctica is not a single continent. It is a large archipelago of islands, with a massive landmass in the east and a smaller one in the west, separated by a transantarctic mountain range and a deep subglacial basin that is, in many places, below sea level. If the ice were to melt, a sea channel would indeed separate the continent into 2 main islands, exactly as Philippe Bouache had drawn it in 1737. How could he possibly have known this? It is a piece of information that is completely, totally, and utterly impossible for the 18th century. There is no explanation within our current historical framework. No theory of lucky guesses or coincidences can account for this level of specific, verified detail. The only explanation is the one that history books refuse to consider. Like Piri Reis and Phineas before him, must have had access to the remnants of an ancient global mapping project. A project undertaken by a civilization that knew the Earth intimately, a civilization that saw Antarctica in its true form, without the ice. These maps are not just curiosities, they are evidence. They are fingerprints left at the scene of a historical crime, the crime of erasure. Someone or something wiped a global advanced civilization from our history so completely that all we have left are these faint ghostly copies of their knowledge. These maps ask us a terrifying question. If this knowledge existed, where did it go? Who collected the original source maps, and why have they been hidden from us? The existence of such maps implies the existence of a gatekeeper of history, a hidden hand that has curated, edited, and controlled our understanding of the past. An organization or power that has been aware of this lost world for centuries and has chosen, for their own reasons, to keep the rest of humanity in the dark. The maps point to a lost world. And that lost world points to a silent, ongoing conspiracy. The implications of these ancient maps are staggering. They to confront a reality that is deeply uncomfortable. The story of humanity is not what we've been told. It's not a simple upward climb from primitive cave dwellers to our modern technological age. The maps suggest a different pattern. A pattern of cycles. Of great civilizations that rise to incredible heights of knowledge and power, and then fall, vanishing so completely that they are forgotten, leaving behind only these faint, cryptic echoes of their praise. Existence. The maps are the what. They show us a glimpse of a lost science, an impossible knowledge, but they also force us to ask the how and the who. How did a civilization in the distant past achieve this? And who were they? This is where the journey takes us from the dusty archives of cartography into the heart of a geological and historical mystery. To even consider the possibility of an ancient Antarctic civilization, the continent itself must have been habitable. Mainstream science tells us that Antarctica has been frozen for millions of years, a slow geological process that leaves no room for human civilization as we know it. But what if the process wasn't slow? What if the freezing of Antarctica was a sudden, cataclysmic event? This is not just a wild theory. It is a possibility rooted in clues found deep within the Earth itself. Scientists drilling ice cores in Antarctica have pulled up samples from the very bottom layers, ice that is hundreds of thousands of years old. These cores, they have found things that should not be there. They have found layers of volcanic ash, evidence of massive volcanic eruptions that would have violently shaken the continent. More incredibly, they have found trapped pollen from ancient trees, including species of beech and even palm trees. They have found the fossilized remains of forests, proving that Antarctica was once warm and green. The official explanation is that this was all millions of years ago. But the data is not always so clear-cut. Some evidence suggests that temperate conditions might have persisted in parts of the continent much more recently than the official timeline allows. This is where we encounter the work of a man who was dismissed by the mainstream, but whose ideas refused to go away, Charles Hapgood. In his 1958 book, Earth-Shifting Crust, Hapgood, a historian and professor, put forward a radical theory. He proposed that the entire outer crust of the Earth can sometimes shift in one solid piece over the softer, molten interior, much like the skin of an orange slipping over the fruit. He called this Earth crust displacement. According to Hapgood, such a shift wouldn't need millions of years. It could happen relatively quickly, over a few thousand years, or perhaps even faster in a cataclysmic event. A displacement of the crust could move an entire continent from a temperate zone into a polar zone with terrifying speed. Hapgood suggested that this is exactly what happened to Antarctica. He believed that as recently as 12,000 years ago, Antarctica was not at the South Pole. It was located about 2,000 miles further north, in a climate that was temperate and habitable. Then, a massive displacement of the Earth's crust shifted it to its current polar location, causing a rapid and catastrophic freezing event that entombed an entire world under the ice. This theory, if true, would explain everything. It would explain how an advanced civilization could have flourished on a green Antarctica. It would explain the ancient map showing an ice-free continent. And it would explain why that civilization vanished without a trace, flash frozen in time. Hapgood's theory was not just baseless speculation. He supported it with evidence from ancient maps, including the Piri-Reis and Orontius-Phineas maps, which he argued were impossible to explain otherwise. He also pointed to geological and paleontological anomalies, like the discovery of flash-frozen mammoths in Siberia with undigested food still in their stomachs, suggesting a sudden, catastrophic climate shift. Mainstream science largely rejected Hapgood's theory. It was too radical. It contradicted the slow, uniformitarian model of geology that has dominated scientific thought for over a century. But his work captured the imagination of some of the 20th century's greatest minds, who saw in it a plausible explanation for the many mysteries of Earth's ancient past. Hapgood's theory opens a door to a terrifying vision of our planet's history, a history not of slow, gradual change, but of violent, cyclical cataclysms. A history where entire worlds can be lost and forgotten. If he was right, then Antarctica is not just a frozen continent. It is a Pompeii on a planetary scale. A civilization, its cities, its people, its knowledge, all perfectly preserved beneath miles of ice, waiting to be found. And this raises the most chilling question of all. If such a thing were discovered, if we found undeniable proof of a lost, technologically advanced human civilization, would we be told about it? Or would such a discovery be deemed too dangerous, too disruptive to our current world order, our religions, our sense of self? Would the powers that be choose to share it, or would they deepen the conspiracy of silence, ensuring that the lost world of Antarctica remains lost forever? The idea of a lost civilization under the ice is where this mystery transitions from strange maps and geological theories into something far more tangible and immediate. If a civilization existed, it must have left behind more than just memories on ancient charts. It must have ruins, structures, cities. And it is in the search for these ruins that the story of Antarctica becomes a story of modern-day suppression, of classified information, and of tantalizing, horrifying glimpses of what might be hid first from us. In the age of satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, Antarctica is no longer a complete unknown. We have mapped its subglacial topography. We know the shape of the mountains and valleys buried beneath the ice, and in this data, anomalies have begun to appear, things that do not look natural. In 2016, satellite images circulated in 2016, Satellite images circulated on, showing what appeared to be a massive, pyramid-like structure jutting out from the snow. It had four steep, symmetrical sides, looking uncannily like the pyramids of Egypt, only much larger. The official explanation was that it is a nuatak, a natural rock peak eroded by ice and wind into a pyramidal shape. A geological coincidence. But is it? How many coincidences can we accept before we start to see a pattern? Other satellite images have revealed strange, linear features under the snow, looking like ancient roads or walls. Radar scan of the subglacial land have picked up anomalies that some researchers have interpreted as the outlines of enormous buildings, even entire buried cities. One of the most famous of these is the so-called anomaly in the Wilkesland region, a massive circular feature 150 miles wide, buried deep beneath the ice. Scientists suggest it is the impact crater from a gigantic asteroid that struck the Earth millions of years ago. But others have pointed out that its shape, as detected by gravity-sensing satellites, also resembles a massive artificial complex. These are just the publicly known anomalies. What have the world's governments and militaries found with their classified, high-resolution technology? This is where the story descends into the murky world of whistleblowers and leaked accounts. Over the years, stories have surfaced from anonymous sources claiming to be former military personnel, pilots, or scientists who worked in Antarctica. These stories, while unverified, paint a consistent and terrifying picture. They speak of being ordered to fly over specific areas where they witnessed things they could not explain. Huge, dark entrances into the ice shelf. Strange lights emanating from beneath the frozen surface. And, in the most dramatic accounts, glimpses of ancient ruins, partially exposed by melting ice, before their superiors quickly declared the area a restricted zone and swore them to secrecy. Act of treason. One such account, widely circulated in alternative research circles, comes from a supposed US Navy flight engineer who claimed to have flown multiple missions over a restricted area near the Transanta. Arctic Mountains. He described seeing a massive hole in the ice, large enough to fly a transport plane into, and said that his crew was told it was a secret scientific research station. But he also claimed they were forbidden from flying directly over it, and that their onboard sensor equipment would often go haywire in the vicinity. He described a feeling of deep dread and the sense that they were trespassing on something ancient and not of their world. Is his story true? We have no way of knowing. His identity has never been confirmed, but his account, and others like it, feed into a growing suspicion that the science being conducted in Antarctica is a cover story. These accounts, combined with the satellite anomalies, create a powerful narrative. They suggest that the discovery has already been made, that the powers that be are not searching for a lost civilization. They have already found it, and they are now engaged in a silent, desperate effort to study it, perhaps exploit it, and, above all, hide it from the rest of the world. Why? What could they have found that would warrant such an extreme level of secrecy? Is it just the ruins of an ancient human civilization? The knowledge that we are not the first would be world-changing, but would it require a global military lockdown? Or have they found something more? Something that isn't human? This is the deepest, darkest fear of the Antarctic mystery, that the civilization that existed there was not like ours. that the ruins under the ice are not stone and mortar, but contain a technology, a biology, or a history that would not just rewrite our past, but shatter our present. That the gatekeepers of Antarctica are not just hiding a forgotten chapter of human history, they are guarding us from a truth about reality itself. A truth they believe humanity is not ready to face, and perhaps they are right to be afraid. To truly grasp the scale of the potential cover-up in Antarctica, we must look at the legal and political framework that governs the continent. The Antarctic Treaty System is unique in human history. It is the only place on Earth that is not owned by any nation, a continent ruled by a committee of the world's most powerful countries. On the surface, its goals are noble: to prevent conflict, protect the environment, and promote scientific research. But when viewed through the lens of a possible hidden history, the treaty takes on a much more sinister appearance. It becomes the perfect instrument for enforcing a global conspiracy of silence. Think about the timing. The treaty was signed in 1959. This was just 1 year after the International Geophysical Year, IGEI, of 1957-1958, a massive, coordinated scientific effort where thousands of scientists from dozens of countries, the Soviet Union, descended upon Antarctica. It was during the EGY that the first comprehensive maps of the subglacial continent were made. It was then that humanity first got a clear picture of the world hidden beneath the ice. And it was immediately after this period of intense discovery that the world's powers rushed to sign a treaty that effectively locked the continent down. Is it a coincidence that as soon as we developed the technology to see what was truly there, an international law was created to control who could go there and what they could report? The treaty essentially creates a gatekeeper committee. Any significant activity in Antarctica, from building a new base to conducting a major expedition, requires the consensus of the treaty's consultative parties, the original signatories, and a handful of these turbines. Other nations with significant scientific programs there. This means no single nation, no private corporation, no independent group of researchers can simply go and explore freely. They must get permission from the very group of nations that would have the most to lose if a disruptive truth were uncovered. It is a system designed not for openness, but for control. Consider the military aspect. The treaty bans any measures of a military nature, such as the establishment of military bases and fortifications, the carrying out of military maneuvers, as well as the test of any type of weapon. And yet, the continent is teeming with military presence. The United States McMurdo Station, the largest settlement in Antarctica, is operated by the US Antarctic Program but relies entirely on logistical support from the US military. Military cargo planes, icebreakers, and personnel are a constant feature of life on the ice. The official reason is that the harsh environment requires military-grade logistics and expertise. But also means that the most powerful military on Earth has a permanent controlling presence, continent's access points, and infrastructure. It means they see everything, and they control everything that moves. Then there are the stories of strange, high-profile visits to the continent. In recent years, a number of influential figures have made quiet, unpublicized trips to Antarctica. These are not scientists or explorers, but people from the worlds of politics, religion, and finance. Why would they travel to the most remote and desolate place on Earth? The official reasons are usually vague. An interest in climate change, or a desire to see the pristine wilderness. But for many observers, these trips look less like tourism and more like pilgrimages or inspections. Are these influential figures being taken to see the progress of the official scientific research? Or are they being shown something else? Something kept in a secret location, something that is part of the great secret the treaty is designed to protect. The Antarctic Treaty System, with its veneer of peaceful science, can be seen as the ultimate tool of information management. It creates a closed system where all data flows back to a small, powerful group of nations. It allows them to publicly release information that fits the official narrative, data about ice cores, penguin colonies, and climate change, while classifying or suppressing anything that contradicts it. TOFUS, offer, fee, offer, by search. It gives them the legal framework to deny access to independent journalists, researchers, and explorers who might ask the wrong questions. It is a perfect, self-contained world of control. A place where a secret of unimaginable magnitude could be kept, perhaps indefinitely. The treaty isn't protecting the ice, it's protecting the secret buried beneath it. And every year that passes, every new base that is built, every military cargo plane that lands, the grip of that secrecy only tightens. As we delve deeper into this abyss of secrecy, we must confront the darkest and most speculative corners of the Antarctic mystery. This is where the story leaves the realm of verifiable maps and geological data and enters the world of high-level government operations, secret societies, and whispers of a history that connects the world. Ice of Antarctica to the horrors of the 20th century. For some researchers, the modern story of the Antarctic cover-up does not begin in 1959 with the treaty, but years earlier, in the dying days of the Second World War, with the ambitions of the Third Reich. There is a persistent and well-documented fascination that the Nazi regime had with Antarctica. Between 1938 and 1939, they launched a major expedition to the continent, led by the explorer Alfred Richter. Using seaplanes launched from a ship, the expedition mapped a vast area of Antarctica, dropping thousands of metal swastika flags to claim the territory for Germany. They named this region Neuschwabenland, or New Swabia. The official purpose of the expedition was to secure a whaling station to reduce Germany's reliance on imported fats. But the sheer scale of the operation and the secrecy surrounding it has led many to believe its true purpose was far more sinister. The Nazis, particularly the inner circle obsessed with esoteric beliefs and ancient myths, were fanatical seekers of lost knowledge and power. They believed in the existence of a hollow earth, in ancient super races like the Aryans, and in lost continents like Atlantis and Thule. For them, Antarctica was not just a piece of land to be claimed. It was a place of immense mythological importance, a potential gateway to another world, or the location of a lost homeland. According to some theories, the Neuschwabenland expedition was not just about mapping, it was about searching for something, and perhaps finding it. This is where the story plunges into the shadows. After the war, as Allied forces were uncovering the full extent of Nazi Germany's secret projects, a strange legend began to circulate. The legend of Base 211. The legend of Base 211. According to these stories, the Nazis had used their pre-war knowledge to establish a secret, permanent base in Antarctica, hidden in a network of warm, ice-free caves and tunnels created by geothermal activity. This base, known as Base 211 or New Berlin, was said to be a last refuge for the Nazi elite, a place where they could continue their research into advanced, otherworldly technology and wait for the day they could rise again. It sounds like pure fantasy, but the story is fueled by strange and unsettling historical footnotes. After Germany's surrender, hundreds of German U-boats were unaccounted for. Two of them, months after the war had ended, mysteriously surrendered in Argentina. Their crews refused to say where they had been. This fueled speculation that a ghost convoy of advanced U-boats had transported key Nazi leaders, scientists, and technology to a safe haven in Antarctica. Adding to the mystery is Operation High Jump, a massive US naval operation in Antarctica 1946-1947. Officially, it was a scientific and training mission, but its scale was enormous, involving an aircraft carrier, a dozen other warships, and thousands of troops. The operation was supposed to last for 6 to 8 months, but was abruptly cut short after just 8 weeks. The fleet returned to South America, battered and having suffered significant casualties and equipment losses. The official report was classified. But the expedition's leader, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a renowned polar explorer, gave a strange and cryptic interview to a Chilean newspaper upon his return. He was quoted as saying that it was imperative for the United States to initiate defensive measures against enemy fighters that can fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. He spoke of a new enemy and a new kind of war. His comments were quickly suppressed, and he never spoke publicly about the matter again. What did Admiral Byrd and his fleet encounter during Operation High Jump? Did they find the remnants of a secret Nazi base? Or did they find something far older and more advanced, something the Nazis had discovered before them? This theory posits that Base 211 was not just a Nazi creation, but that they had discovered and occupied pre-existing structures of non-human origin. That they had found the ruins, or perhaps even the functioning technology, of the ancient civilization that once thrived on a green Antarctica. This would explain their obsession with the continent, and it would explain why the US military would mount such a massive, and ultimately failed, operation to confront them. The story of Neuschwabenland and Operation High Jump connects the ancient mystery of Antarctica to a modern, military and technological one. It suggests that the secret being kept on the continent is not just historical, but is an active and ongoing concern for the world's military and intelligence agencies. It transforms Antarctica from a geological curiosity into a potential theatre of a secret. It transforms Antarctica from a geological curiosity into a potential theatre of a secret, and it suggests that the Antarctic Treaty was not just about hiding a past discovery, but about managing an ongoing and potentially hostile presence at the bottom of the world. A presence that is still there, silent, waiting, under the ice. The silence that followed Operation High Jump was not the silence of peace, but the charged silence of a secret too large to contain. Admiral Byrd's chilling words about a new enemy and fighters that could fly from pole to pole were quickly scrubbed from the official record, dismissed as the ramblings of a tired explorer or a mistra. Nestlation by an overzealous journalist. For those who study the hidden corners of history, his warning was a flare fired in the dark, illuminating for a brief, terrifying moment the true nature of the Antarctic enigma. It told us that the secret being guarded was not just a historical relic. It was active, it was technological, and it was a threat. This forces us to ask a question that takes us beyond lost cities and frozen ruins. What kind of technology could a lost civilization have possessed? What could be so advanced that it would terrify the victorious American military in 1947 and compel the world superpowers to lock down an entire continent? To find the answer, we must look for echoes of this lost science in the myths and legends of our own recorded history. Because if a global, advanced civilization existed, this technology would not have been confined to a single continent. Traces of it would have been seen all over the world. Traces that we have long dismissed as fantasy. Consider the ancient texts of India, the Vedas and the Mahabharata. For centuries, they have been read as epic poems, as religious mythology. But what if they are more? What if they are the distorted memories of a technological age? These texts speak of vimanas, intricate flying machines that sailed through the sky. The descriptions are not vague. They are often stunningly technical. They speak of vimanas powered by a strange, fiery vortex engine, capable of moving in any direction, hovering in place, and traveling vast distances. They describe aerial warfare, with weapons that sound eerily like modern energy beams and explosives. For generations, we have called this poetry. But what if it was history? What if the so-called gods were not divine beings, but the pilots of this lost technology, the remnants of a global civilization whose power seemed magical to the primitive survivors of the last cat? Alkalism. This idea of a forgotten high technology is not limited to India. Myths of flying chariots, of cities in the sky, of weapons that could level mountains, are found in cultures all over the world. We have called them the work of imagination, but perhaps they are the fragmented recollections of a science we are only just beginning to rediscover. A science that may have originated from the very civilization that once flourished on a temperate Antarctica. This ancient science would not have been built on fossil fuels and combustion engines. The legends hint at something far more elegant, more powerful, and more in tune with the fundamental forces of the universe. They hint at a mastery of energy that we are still struggling to comprehend. Researchers in this forbidden field speak of zero-point energy, the concept of tapping the limitless quantum energy that exists in the vacuum of space itself. They speak of acoustic levitation, the ability to move massive stones and build colossal structures using the power of sound and frequency, which might explain the impossible megalithic sites found over the globe. They speak of crystal-based technology, the use of giant crystals to harness and transmit energy over vast distances, creating a planetary power grid that would make our own clumsy network of wires. Primitive. This is the kind of technology that would be silent, powerful, and seemingly magical. This is the kind of technology that could power a global civilization. And this is the kind of technology that, if rediscovered, would render every existing economic and military power structure on Earth obsolete overnight. Control of oil would become meaningless. The dominance of nations with large armies would evaporate. It would be the greatest paradigm shift in human history. And that is a shift that the current powers that be would do anything to prevent. Now, bring this idea back to the ice of Antarctica. What if the Nazi expedition and later Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump did not just find empty ruins? What if they found the machinery of this lost science, dormant but not dead? What if, buried deep beneath the ice, ancient power plants still hum with a quiet, terrifying energy? This would explain the persistent reports of strange magnetic and gravitational anomalies on the continent. Scientists have recorded massive, unexplained fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field over Antarctica. Pilots have reported bizarre compass and instrument failures when flying over certain regions. These are not stories from conspiracy websites. They are documented phenomena that mainstream science to explain, usually attributing them to complex geology or solar wind interactions. But what if the cause is not natural? What if these are the effects of ancient, powerful machinery stirring in its sleep? What if the magnetic anomalies are the faint pulse of a power source beyond our comprehension? Or what if the reason for the no-fly zones is not to protect the environment, but to keep our own technology from interfering with or being destroyed by an ancient technology that is still active? This is a thought of profound terror and wonder. The idea that we are living on a planet that contains the sleeping remnants of a superior science. That the lost civilization of Antarctica did not truly die, but that its legacy, its power, is still there, waiting. This would explain the urgency of the cover-up. It would explain the global military presence. They are not just hiding a city. They are trying to understand, contain, and perhaps control a power source that could rewrite the laws of physics as we know them. The secret of Antarctica is not just that a civilization was lost. It is that their technology was not, and it is still there, humming beneath the ice. The existence of a lost superior technology is a world-shattering concept. It would rewrite our history and redefine our future. But as we peel back the layers of this mystery, we are forced to confront an even more fundamental and disturbing question. If this civilization existed, who were they? Were they simply ancient humans like us, who achieved a different kind of scientific progress? Or were they something else? This is where the Antarctic mystery takes its most unnerving turn, leading us from the realm of lost technology to the realm of lost biology, into the possibility that the beings who inhabited Betan, Scient, green world, were not quite human at all. This is not a question born of pure fantasy. It is born from a pattern of strange and unsettling archaeological discoveries that have been made all over the world. Discoveries that hint at a different kind of humanity in our distant past. We see it in the colossal megalithic structures that seem to have been built by beings of immense size and strength. We see it in the ancient legends from every culture that speak of an age when giants walked the earth. And we see it, most unnervingly, in the skeletal remains that have been found and then quietly spirited away from the public record. For decades, there have been reports from excavators and archaeologists of the discovery of unusually large human skeletons, with reports of individuals measuring 8, 9, or even 12 feet tall. Bah, 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 or Hassan, bah. These stories are often dismissed as hoaxes or exaggerations, but the reports are too numerous and too consistent to be ignored so easily. Then there is the mystery of the elongated skulls. In places like Paracas, Peru, and in ancient sites across Malta and Egypt, archaeologists have found skulls that are anatomically different from our own. They are not the result of artificial cranial addition or head binding, a practice used by some ancient cultures. Their cranial volume is significantly larger, and their structure is different. Mainstream science has struggled to explain these skulls, often labeling them as a genetic anomaly, a now extinct human subspecies. But what if they were not an anomaly? What if they were the norm for the civilization that once ruled the Earth? What does this have to do with Antarctica? If the Antarctic civilization was the global parent culture, the one from which all these myths and anomalous discoveries originate, then it is logical to assume that they too would. That the beings who built those cities and mastered that technology were not built like us. This idea adds a new layer of terror to the Antarctic cover-up. Perhaps the secret being hidden is not just about our history, but about our very identity as a species. The knowledge that we are not the first, and perhaps not even the original form of intelligent life on this planet, would be a truth so profound it could unravel the very fabric of our societies. This biological mystery is at the heart of one of the most intense and secretive scientific endeavors currently underway in Antarctica, the exploration of Lake Vostok. Imagine a lake, one of the largest freshwater lakes on Earth, the size of Lake Ontario. Now imagine it is buried under 2.5 miles of solid ice. It has been sealed off from the surface of the Earth, from light, from air, from any contact with the outside world, for at least 15 million years. Lake Vostok is a time capsule. A pristine prehistoric world, preserved in total isolation. What kind of life, if any, could exist in such an extreme environment? The potential for discovery is immense, and the secrecy surrounding its exploration has been even more immense. For years, a Russian team has been drilling through the ice cap to reach the liquid water of the lake. The project has been slow, arduous, and fraught with strange events. The drilling was repeatedly and inexplicably halted for years at a time. The official reasons given were concerns about contaminating the pristine lake environment. But many observers believe the real reason was that they were encountering things they could not explain and did not want the world to know about. There have been consistent reports of a massive magnetic anomaly at the southern end of the lake, a powerful magnetic force that interferes with equipment and has no known natural cause. As the drill approached the liquid water, the story descends into the darkest realms of conspiracy and fear. Unconfirmed reports and alleged leaks from Russian team members began to circulate. They spoke of the drill breaking through into a vast, oxygen-rich cavern above the water. They spoke of the discovery of strange, microbial life, but also of something more. The most famous and terrifying of these leaks is the story of Organism 46, a supposed discovery made deep within the lake. The story describes a creature resembling a giant, hyper-intelligent octopus with 14 arms, capable of hypnotizing its prey from a distance and exhibiting a terrifying level of predatory intelligence. Ends. The story claims the creature killed several members of the research team before it was captured. It is a story that sounds like science fiction. It is almost certainly a fabrication, a piece of internet folklore, but the fear it represents is real. The fear of what could be lurking in that ancient, isolated world. Even if there are no monsters, the discovery of any complex life in Lake Vostok, a life that has evolved in total isolation for millions of years, would be one of the greatest scientific discoveries in history. It would be life that is truly alien to us, even though it is from our own planet. What if the ecosystem in Lake Vostok and the hundreds of other subglacial lakes in Antarctica is not just microbial? What if, in that pressurized, geothermally heated world beneath the ice, a complex biosphere has thrived? A biosphere that could be the last remnant of the world that existed before the Great Freezing. This is the ultimate biological horror that the Antarctic secret may conceal. That the ancient civilization did not entirely die out, that some form of it, or the life that coexisted with it, survived by retreating into the warm subglacial water systems. That the presence Admiral Byrd warned of, the new enemy, was not an invader from another country or another planet, but an inhabitant of our own world that has been here all along, sleeping, waiting, under the ice. This would explain the absolute, paranoid level of secrecy. It's one thing to hide the ruins of a dead civilization. It is another thing entirely to hide a living one, especially one whose nature, intelligence, and intentions are completely, terrifyingly unknown. With a secret of this magnitude, a secret that encompasses a lost history, a superior technology, and a potentially alien biology, the question of who is guarding it becomes paramount. The cover-up could not be managed by a single government or a clumsy military bureaucracy. An operation of this scale, maintained for over 70 years with near-perfect silence, requires a level of discipline, a long-term vision, and a global reach that transcends national politics. It requires a hidden hand, an organization that operates in the shadows, bound by unbreakable oaths and dedicated to a mission that most of us can barely comprehend. This is where the trail leads us to the doorstep of the world's most powerful and secretive institutions, secret societies, ancient religious orders, and the global elite, who sit at the apex. Where pyramid. When we look for organizations with a historical obsession with lost knowledge, with Atlantis, with ancient wisdom and esoteric science, one group's name invariably surfaces: the Freemasons. This fraternity, with its secret rituals, its hierarchical structure, and its history of attracting members from the highest echelons of power, has long been a subject of fascination and suspicion. Iron. Their symbolism is rich with references to sacred geometry, to the arts of building, and to the search for light or hidden knowledge. Possible that the search for the secrets of Antarctica is part of this long-standing quest. That the scientific exploration of the continent is a modern front for these ancient societies to reclaim the lost knowledge of their mythical forebears. The connection becomes even more intriguing when we consider the historical context. Many of the key figures in the age of exploration, many of the founders of scientific academies, and many of the political leaders who drew the maps of the modern world were themselves high-ranking Freemasons. Is it a coincidence that the same intellectual and politicals that were shaping the modern world were also deeply interested in the secrets of the ancient one? Or were they playing a longer game, using their public influence to pursue a secret, esoteric agenda? An agenda that may have culminated in the discovery and subsequent lockdown of Antarctica. But there is another organization, one with an even longer history, a more disciplined structure, and a far deeper and more intimate connection to the levers of global power. An organization whose presence in this story feels almost inevitable. The religious order known as the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. As we've seen in other historical mysteries, The Jesuits have a nearly 500-year history of operating at the nexus of knowledge, power, and secrecy. They are the intellectual special forces of the Catholic Church, renowned for their elite educational institutions, their strategic minds, and their unwavering loyalty to a mission that often transcends bases. The public-facing goals of the Vatican itself. Could the Jesuits be involved in the Antarctic secret? The possibility is chillingly plausible. The Vatican, their parent institution, holds one of the world's largest archives of ancient maps and texts. As we have seen, documents like the Piri-Reis map were found in the archives of Old World powers. The Vatican Library and its secret archives are legendary for containing documents that have been removed from public history. Did they know about Antarctica all along? Did they possess the original source maps that Piri-Reis and others copied? It is almost certain that they did. This would mean that the highest levels of the Church have been aware of this lost world for centuries. And who would be tasked with managing a secret of this magnitude? The Jesuits, with their global network of universities and scientists, would be the perfect instruments. Jesuit scientists are present in Antarctica. They participate in the official research programs. They are respected members of the scientific community, but they are also bound by a deeper oath. Are they acting as the quiet guardians of the secret, the eyes and ears of an ancient power, ensuring that the official research never strays into forbidden territory? Are they there to guide the narrative, to manage the data, and to ensure that the truth remains buried? The idea of the Black Pope, the superior general of the Jesuits, being involved in such a conspiracy is terrifying. It suggests that the Antarctic cover-up is not just a modern political conspiracy, but a religious and historical one, managed by an organization that thinks in terms of centuries, not election cycle. This brings us to the very top of the pyramid, the modern global elite. The small collection of families and individuals who control the world's financial systems, its corporations, and its political institutions. For them, Antarctica is not just a historical curiosity. It is the ultimate prize. Imagine what the discovery of a limitless, free energy source would do to the global economy, which is built on the scarcity of fossil fuels. Imagine what the discovery of a technology that could manipulate gravity or consciousness would mean for military power. The group that could control this Antarctic legacy would not just be a superpower, they would be, for all practical purposes, gods. Is this why the secret is kept? Not just to prevent public panic or the collapse of our historical and religious narratives, but to allow a small, powerful cabal the time to study and master this ancient science for their own benefit. Are the scientific bases in Antarctica not just research stations, but corporate and military black sites, where its most powerful players are engaged in a secret, high-stakes race to reverse engineer a lost technology? In this view, the Antarctic Treaty is a gentleman's agreement amongst the elite, a way to keep the public out while they divide the spoils. It transforms the continent into the most exclusive private club on Earth, a club where the price of admission is a level of power and influence that few can even imagine. And the prize for membership is the future of humanity itself. The secret is kept, not to protect us, but to control us. To ensure that the power of the past remains in the hands of the few who rule the present. The structure of this global conspiracy, if it exists, is a pyramid of silence. At the bottom are the soldiers and pilots who are sworn to secrecy. Above them are the mainstream scientists who are guided away from inconvenient truths. Above them are the secret societies and religious orders who manage the historical and spiritual narrative. And at the very top are the global elite who play for the ultimate prize. Each layer is a buffer, a file denial and misdirection, designed to protect the core secret. A secret that is now, after millennia of silence, under a new and unpredictable threat. A threat not from explorers or whistleblowers, but from the planet itself. The great Antarctic secret has been kept for millennia, first by a cataclysm of ice, and then by a conspiracy of men. But no secret can be kept forever, and the walls of this frozen prison are beginning to melt. The cover-up, so meticulously maintained for decades, is now facing a threat it cannot control, a force it cannot silence. The Earth's changing climate is the wild card in this dangerous game. The great thaw has begun, and it is accelerating at a rate that terrifies climate scientists. But for the guardians of the Antarctic secret, it represents a different kind of terror. It is a ticking clock, counting down to a forced revelation. For years, the melting of the ice was a slow, manageable process. It exposed new coastlines, small areas of rock, but nothing that couldn't be controlled or explained away. But now the process is exponential. Massive ice shelves, the size of entire countries, are fracturing and collapsing into the sea. Glaciers that have been stable for thousands of years are now retreating at a rate of miles per year. And as the ice disappears, what has been buried for so long is beginning to stir. The melting is no longer just a concern for environmentalists. It has become a full-blown crisis for the conspiracy of silence. This is why, in recent years, we have seen a frantic and unprecedented increase in activity on the continent. The number of scientific bases has exploded. The logistical and military presence has been quietly and massively reinforced. The secret, high-profile visits have become more frequent. This is not the behavior of a scientific community calmly studying climate change. This is the behavior of a scientific community calmly studying climate change. This is the behavior of a crisis management team in a panic. They are in a desperate race again. A race to find, catalogue, and retrieve whatever is down there before the melting ice exposes it to the world's satellites and, eventually, to the public eye. Imagine the scene at these secret black sites beneath the Antarctic bases. Teams of scientists and soldiers working around the clock, drilling deep into the ice, deploying submersible drones into subglacial lakes, and trying to act the ruins of a world that should not exist. Stunned. What are they finding? Are they salvaging the remnants of a lost technology? Are they trying to communicate with something that has been awakened by the changing conditions? The intensity of the secrecy suggests that the stakes are higher than ever. They are no longer just sitting on a secret. They are actively dealing with the consequences of its re-emergence. The melting ice is a geopolitical crisis of unimaginable proportions. Every nation involved in the treaty knows that the clock is ticking. The old gentleman's agreement to cooperate and share is likely breaking down behind the scenes. Who will be the first to master the ancient technology? Who will be the first to make contact with whatever life exists beneath the ice? A secret Cold War is likely being waged under the cover of scientific research. A war for control of Antarctica's legacy. A war that could easily turn hot. For us, the public, the melting ice represents something else. It is the promise of truth. The lies and the secrecy can only hold for so long against the power of a warming planet. The evidence, undeniable and world-shattering, will eventually be exposed. The ruins will emerge from their frozen slumber. The technology will build. The history of our world will be broken open. The guardians of the secret know this. They know they are losing control. The dam of secrecy is cracking, and the flood of truth is coming. We are living in the final moments of the old world, the final years of the great forgetting. The age of the Antarctic secret is coming to an end. But the end of the secret is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one, a new chapter of human history that will be forced upon us, whether we are ready for it or not. The question is no longer if the secret will be revealed, but when. And what will humanity do on the day it wakes up to discover that everything it knew about its past, its identity, and its place in the universe was a lie? The ice is melting, the clock is ticking, and something is about to awaken. What would that day of revelation look like? Imagine the world's news networks, simultaneously and breathlessly, broadcasting the first clear satellite images. Not of a pyramid-shaped rock, but of an entire unmistakable city complex emerging from the melting ice of Western Antarctica. Intricate structures, massive buildings, and geometric layouts that are undeniably artificial. The reports would be confused, chaotic. Governments would issue denials. Experts would be rushed onto television to offer explanations about strange geological formations, but the evidence would be too clear, too overwhelming. The lie would crumble in a matter of hours. The first casualty would be our history. Every textbook, every encyclopedia, every museum exhibit would become obsolete overnight. The neat, linear story of human progress would be exposed as a comforting fable. We would be forced to confront the reality of a lost, global, advanced civilization that preceded our own by millennia. Who were they? How did they achieve such heights? And why did they fall? These questions would dominate every aspect of our culture. It would be a moment of profound humility. A realization that we are not the pinnacle of creation, but merely one cycle in a long and forgotten saga, a saga of catastrophic loss and rebirth. The second casualty would be our religions. Every major faith is built upon a foundation of its own unique creation story, its own timeline of humanity's relationship with the divine. The discovery of existing, advanced civilization would throw these narratives into chaos. If humans had achieved a golden age thousands of years before the events described in the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, what does that mean for the claims of these religions? The revelation would not necessarily disprove the existence of God, but it would shatter the authority of the institutions that claim to speak for him. It would force a spiritual reckoning on a global scale, a search for a new understanding of our place in the cosmos, freed from the dogmas of the past. The third, and perhaps most dangerous casualty, would be our global power structure. The discovery would not just be of ancient stones, it would be of a lost science, a lost technology. The first nation or corporation to gain control of and reverse engineer this technology would achieve a level of power unprecedented in human history. The race to control Antarctica's secrets would break out into the open, a frantic, global scramble for the ultimate prize. It could trigger a new kind of world war. A war fought not over territory or resources, but over the legacy of a forgotten world. The potential for conflict would be unimaginable. And what if the discovery is not just of a dead civilization, but of a living one? What if the beings beneath the ice are still there? The revelation that we are not alone on our own planet would be the most profound shock in the history of our species. Are they friendly? Are they hostile? Are they the enemy Admiral Byrd warned of? The fear, the paranoia, the potential for a catastrophic misunderstanding would be immense. Humanity, a species so prone to fighting amongst itself, would now be faced with a true other, an other that a silent neighbor for millennia. This is the truth that the guardians of the secret have been trying to prevent. Not just to maintain their own power, but perhaps out of a genuine, paternalistic fear that humanity is not mature enough to handle it. A fear that the revelation would not lead to enlightenment, but to chaos, and to own self-destruction. They have treated us like children, feeding us a simplified, sanitized version of reality, because they believe we are not ready for the terrifying complexity of the truth. But they have made a fatal miscalculation. They have underestimated the power of the planet itself. They thought they could control the secret, but they have made a fatal miscalculation. They have underestimated the power, and the ice is now making its own decision. The secret is coming, whether they or we for it. We are the generation that will witness the end of the old world. We are standing on the precipice of the greatest discovery in human history. A discovery that will be terrifying, chaotic, and dangerous. But it will also be a moment of incredible opportunity. An opportunity to finally learn the full story of our species, to reclaim our lost history, and to step into a new, wider future. The ice is melting, the ruins are emerging, and the world, as we know it, is about to end. And in its place, a new, stranger, and more wondrous world about to be born. The question that remains is, will we be its inheritors or its first victims? The whispers from the ice are getting louder, and soon they will become a roar that the entire world will hear. The world continues, as it always has, on a path of comfortable ignorance. We are born into a history that has been written for us, a science that has been approved for us, and a future that has been planned for us. We live our lives within the walls of this carefully constructed reality, never suspecting that the true walls are not made of brick and mortar, but of silence. A silence that has held for 70 years, a silence that has guarded a secret for 12,000 years. But that silence is about to break. Because in the heart of the great white desert at the bottom of the world, something has begun to stir. The guardians of the secret, the global elite, the military powers, the ancient orders, they have all felt it, and they are terrified. The first sign is an event that is felt but not seen. It happens without warning on a day like any other, deep in the most remote and restricted sector of Antarctica, in the vast desolation near the mountains of Ellsworth Land. The world shudders. It is not an earthquake, not in the way our seismologists understand it. It is a deep, resonant pulse from beneath the ice, a vibration of impossible power that propagates through the planet's crust in an instant. The official instruments of the world's geological surveys register it as a deep, anomalous seismic event. But it is the unofficial, classified sensors on military satellites that tell the true story. For a few fleeting microseconds, a burst of energy radiates from the South Pole, an electromagnetic pulse so clean and so powerful that it temporarily blinds satellites in low orbit and causes phantophobia. signals to ghost across the world's communication grids. The cover-up is immediate and seamless. The world's governments, acting with a chilling and unspoken coordination, announce a major, unexpected geomagnetic storm. Solar flare activity, they call it. News channels run with the sun, and experts are paraded before cameras to reassure the public that the brief disruptions to GPS and communications are a natural phenomenon. It is a lie, and they know it. But it is a lie they have been preparing to tell for decades, because the signal from Antarctica was not chaotic like a solar flare. It was patterned. It was complex. It was undeniably intelligent. It was not a storm. It was a message, or perhaps a key turning in a lock. Behind the curtain of this global deception, a frantic, silent panic. Naval fleets from the US, Russia, and China, already positioned in the Southern Ocean under the guise of patrols, begin to move. They form a tight, impenetrable blockade around the continent. Air traffic over Antarctica is grounded completely, citing the unpredictable atmospheric effects of the solar storm. Independent research stations are placed on communication lockdown. Every piece of data, every sensor reading, every satellite image of the continent is now classified at a level far above top secret. The guardians of the secret are gates. They are trying to put the monster back in its cage, but it is too late. The cage is already broken. Despite the total information blackout, the truth begins to bleed out from the edges. A junior technician at a European Space Agency listening post, before his access is permanently revoked, leaks a single data file to an obscure internet forum. The file shows the energy signature from Antarctica. It is not random noise. It contains a clear, repeating mathematical structure based on the constant of pi, a universal signature of intelligence. At a private university in Japan, a seismology professor, whose instruments are not tied to the government grid, records the anomalous seismic wave. He notes that it did not propagate from a single epicenter like an earthquake, but seemed to emanate from a massive area, as if an entire region of the continent had rung like a bell. He publishes his initial findings, and his university's funding is threatened within hours. The world may not know what has happened, but it knows it has been lied to. A global sense of dread begins to permeate the collective consciousness. The whispers about Antarctica are no longer just conspiracies. They are becoming a reality. The beacon has been lit. And now, the world holds its breath, waiting for the darkness to answer. The energy pulse was only the beginning. It was the sound of the door being unlocked. Now, the door was beginning to swing open. In the days following the event, the guardians of the secret focused their most advanced surveillance technology on the source of the pulse, the forbidden territory in the Ellsworth mountain range. What their classified satellites saw has never been, and may never be, released to the public. But a single ghostly image leaked by an anonymous source within the American National Reconnaissance Office was enough to change the world forever. The image was a synthetic aperture radar scan, capable of piercing clouds and darkness, and it showed something that was simply not possible. Where there was once a smooth, unbroken expanse of ice 2 miles thick, there was now a gaping circular hole. The ice had not been melted from above. The edges of the hole were sharp and clean. It had been vaporized from below, and in the center of that chasm, emerging from the depths of a darkness that had not seen light in millennia, was the top of a structure. It was not stone. It was not metal. It appeared to be a dark, crystalline, geometric complex built on a scale that dwarfed any man-made object. Its surfaces were smooth, non-reflective, seeming to drink the light of the radar scans, and its geometry was unsettling, alien, with angles and curves that seemed to defy the laws of perspective. It was modern, it was pristine, and active. The satellite that took the image also detected a faint, localized energy field emanating from the structure, a field that seemed to be gently pushing the Earth's own magnetic field away from it. The silent panic among the world's leaders became a mad scramble. This was no longer a secret to be kept, but a phenomenon to be confronted. The first response was technological. Unmanned drones, the most advanced in the US military's arsenal, were flown towards the site. As they approached the perimeter of the revealed structure, their video feeds, which were being watched in real time in a bunker deep beneath the Pentagon, began to distort. Then, one by one, they simply went dead. Not crashing, not exploding, they just ceased to exist on any sensor. They had been unmade. The next step was a human one. A small, elite team of special forces, the best of the best, was dispatched on a covert mission to approach the site on foot. They were equipped their own encrypted communication systems and environmental suits designed to withstand the harshest conditions. Their mission was simple: get close, observe, and report back. The mission was a failure. The team made it to the edge of the chasm. The last garbled transmission received from the team leader was a string of broken, terrified phrases. "It's not possible. The angles are wrong." A pause, filled with the sound of static and what sounded like a low, vibrating hum. "Walls are moving. It's a sound, but it's not a sound. Oh God, it's in my head." The transmission ended. A rescue mission found no trace of the team. No bodies, no equipment. They had simply vanished. This is where the story of Antarctica ceases to be a human story. What has emerged from the ice is not the legacy of a lost human civilization. It is something other. And now, for the first time, humanity was forced to confront the true nature of the presence it had been sharing the planet with. The first contact was not an exchange of greetings. It was a demonstration of a power so absolute and so alien that it defied every category of our understanding. The entities associated with the structure, for there were indeed entities, were not little green men in silver spaceships. The few remote probes that got close enough before disabled sent back fragmented data that was the stuff of nightmares and madness. They were not solid in the way we understand it. They appeared as shifting, multi-dimensional forms, part biological, part light, part pure geometry. They did not walk, they flowed. They did not speak, they resonated. The effect they had on human consciousness was catastrophic. The soldiers who got too close did not die of weapon fire, they died of perception. Their minds, unable to process the impossible reality they were witnessing, simply broke. The beings from under the ice were not hostile in a way we could fight. They were simply so different, so advanced, so far beyond our evolutionary path, that their very presence was a weapon. Their reality was poison to ours. The world now teetered on the brink of a new kind of insanity. The leak image of the structure, the rumors of the vanished military team, the global energy pulse, it all combined to create a planet-wide psychological crisis. The official lie of a solar storm was now laughable. Governments had no answers. They could only fall back on their oldest instinct: fear. They began to frame the Antarcticans as a hostile threat, an alien invasion. It was the only narrative that allowed them to maintain a semblance of control, the only story that allowed them to point their weapons at something. But they knew, in the deepest secret chambers of power, they knew, you cannot declare war on a law of physics. You cannot bomb a state of being. The age of human dominance was over. We were no longer the masters of our own house. The true landlords had awakened, and we were merely tenants whose lease had just expired. The awakening in Antarctica was followed by a profound and terrifying silence. The world's militaries had created a blockade, a ring of steel around the frozen continent, but it was a meaningless gesture. They were guarding a door that had already been opened from the other side. The entities that had emerged, the inhabitants, showed no signs of aggression. They did not attack. They did not expand beyond the perimeter of their revealed city. They simply were, and their silent, powerful presence was more than any declaration of war. Then the second event began. And it was far more intimate and terrifying than the first. It did not begin with a pulse of energy, but with a whisper in the global mind. It started with the dreamers, the artists, the mystics, the people whose minds were most open to the strange currents of the universe. They began to have shared, vivid dreams. Dream world of light and sound, of impossible cities and cosmic histories. Then it's people all over the world, regardless of culture or belief, began to experience it. A faint, persistent hum in the back of their consciousness. A sense of being watched by an intelligence so vast, it was like the sky itself had awareness. It was not a sound heard with the ears, but a vibration felt in the bones, in the very structure of thought. The inhabitants were communicating. They were not using language, not radio waves, not any technology we could detect or jam. They were interfacing directly with the planetary consciousness, with the shared psychic field of humanity. And they began to broadcast. It was not a message in the way we understand it. It was a flood, a torrent of pure information downloaded into the minds of anyone receptive enough to listen. It was a stream of mathematical truths that made our most advanced physics look like a child's arithmetic. It was star charts of galaxies we did not know existed, drawn from a perspective that was not of this solar system. It was biological blueprints of life forms that defied our categories of plant and animal. And most profoundly, it was history, a history that was not our own. The broadcast, pieced together by the millions who were experiencing it in fragments, told a new story of our world. It was a story of deep time, of cosmic cycles. The inhabitants were not invaders from another star system. They were far more ancient than that. They were, in a sense, the original engineers of this planet's biosphere. A seed civilization that had journeyed here eons ago. Their message, translated from pure concept into human thought, was this: we are the memory of this world. We shaped its first oceans, guided its first life. The reality you inhabit is but one dream of the Earth, one cycle. Your species, humanity, is not the first intelligent life to walk this planet. You are not even the second. You are a wild growth, a beautiful and chaotic species that arose from the ruins of the last great cycle, a cycle that in cataclysm you have no memory of. The broadcast showed images, felt as memories of this last cycle, a global civilization of beings, the ones we would call giants or gods, who had mastered energy and biology. It showed the cataclysm, a cosmic event, a shift in the solar system's magnetic field that triggered a rapid displacement of the planet's crust. The event that flash froze Antarctica, plunging it from a temperate paradise into a polar wasteland. The event that wiped the planet's surface clean. And the broadcast revealed the true purpose of the Antarctic city. It was not a city in our sense. It was an ark, a hibernation chamber, a vast, conscious library of genetics and knowledge designed to ride out the long winter of a cataclysm and reawaken when the planet's orbit and biosphere had stabilized. Their awakening was not an accident, triggered by our bumbling science or our warming planet. It was a pre-programmed event. They had awakened because the cycle was beginning again. This was the core of their message, the part that induced a cold, existential dread in all who understood it. They had not awakened to conquer us. They had not awakened to save us. They had awakened to bear witness and to prepare the planet for the next cleansing. The same cosmic event that had caused the last pole shift, the same cyclical alignment that had buried their world under miles of ice, was approaching again. It was a natural, recurring process in this corner of the galaxy, and it was due. The terror of this revelation was absolute. Our history was a lie. Our identity was a footnote. Our future was a countdown to an unavoidable extinction event. The inhabitants of Antarctica were not gods or monsters. They were something far more terrifying. They were the groundskeepers of a planetary garden, and they had returned to watch the garden be reset. They were not our enemy. In their vast, ancient consciousness, we were barely even there. We were just the current occupants of a house that was scheduled for demolition. And the demolition crew was already on its way, not from across the stars, but from the unchangeable clockwork of the cosmos itself. The broadcast from Antarctica was not a single event. It was a continuous, unfolding revelation that seeped into every corner of human society. It was the end of secrets. The knowledge of our true, cyclical history and our impending doom was no longer the property of a few guardians. It was a shared global trauma. The world did not collapse into immediate anarchy, as the secret keepers had feared. It fell into a state of profound, collective shock, a planetary depression. What is the point of work, of progress, of love, of life, when you know it is all temporary, a fleeting dream before a cosmic reset? This is the moment the old power structures made their final, desperate play. Faced with their own irrelevance, the military, political, and financial elite who had guarded the secret for so long attempted to seize back control of the narrative. They could no longer deny the existence of the Antarctic presence, which the public had begun to call the Ancients, or the Firstborn, so they tried to redefine it. They launched a massive global propaganda campaign to frame the Ancients as a hostile alien threat. Every tool at their disposal, state-controlled media, manipulated social media algorithms, and networks of trusted experts. They began to sow fear and paranoia. They misinterpreted the Ancients' message of a cosmic cycle as a threat of invasion. The technology of the Ancients, they claimed, was a weapon they intended to use against us. The historical data they broadcast was a form of psychological warfare designed to break our will. They called for a united global defense. They called for humanity to rally together, to fight for its survival against this existential enemy. It was a masterful act of psychological manipulation, turning a warning about a natural disaster into a declaration of war. Their goal was simple. If humanity could be united against a common enemy, they, the old guardians, could position themselves as the world's protectors, its generals, its leaders. They could maintain their power even in the face of Armageddon. A great global schism began to form. On one side were the old power structures, the governments and militaries, calling for war, for the seizure of the ancients' technology, and for the defense of human sovereignty. They were joined by those who were most terrified by the new reality, people who craved the old certainties and who were easily swayed by the rhetoric of fear and patriotism. They saw the ancients as a demonic force, a challenge to their faiths and their way of life. They were ready to fight, to die for the world they knew, even if that world was built on a foundation of lies. On the other side was a new global movement, a truth movement of sorts. It was comprised of the scientists, artists, and ordinary people who had been most deeply touched by the ancients' broadcast. They argued that the message was not a threat, but a call to awaken. They believed that fighting the ancients was not just futile, but a suicidal act of cosmic arrogance. They argued that humanity's only hope was to listen, to learn, and to perhaps find a way to survive the coming cataclysm by working with, not against, the planet's original inhabitants. They saw the ancients not as enemies, but as a gateway to a new, higher form of consciousness. The world was now split in two, the party of fear and the party of truth. And between them, the silent, watching presence in Antarctica. The ancients did not react to humanity's internal conflict. They continued their work, their city of light and geometry slowly expanding, their energy field growing stronger. Were they preparing the planet? Or simply preparing their own ark, indifferent to the fate of the chaotic, short-lived species that had temporarily inherited the surface? This was humanity's final test, its ultimate crossroads. The secret was out, the truth was known, the end was coming. But how would we choose to meet it? Would we descend into our oldest, darkest instincts of fear, violence, and a desire for control, lashing out at the messengers because we could not fight the message? Would we follow the old guardians into a final, pointless war, a war against reality itself? Or could we, for the first time in our troubled history, overcome our fear? Could we quiet our egos, accept our true place in the cosmic order, and listen? Could we choose not to fight the storm, but to learn how to build a boat? The fate of our civilization now hangs in the balance, caught between a forgotten past and an inescapable future. The guardians of the lie are making their last stand, their voices loud with the drums of war. The heralds of the truth are with a new path, a path of humility and awakening. And under the ice, the ancients wait. The choice is ours. It has always been ours, but time is running out. The cycle is closing. And the long Antarctic night is about to fall upon the world once more. The air on the planet grew thin with tension. The global schism was no longer a debate. It was a cold war fought with propaganda, cyber attacks, and political assassinations. The party of fear, led by the remnants of the old world's military and intelligence agencies, consolidated its power. They used the threat of the alien ancients to justify unprecedented levels of global surveillance and control. Dissent was labelled as treason. Those who preached a message of peace and understanding with the ancients were branded as collaborators, as cultists, as enemies of humanity. They were disappeared into secret prisons, their voices silenced, their movements erased from the public sphere. Meanwhile, the party of truth was forced underground. They catered through decentralized encrypted networks, creating a global digital resistance. They worked tirelessly to counter the official propaganda, to share the fragments of the ancients' broadcast, and to awaken the public to the true nature of the coming cataclysm and the futility of war. They were not just fighting a political battle, they were fighting for the soul of humanity. They knew that the real enemy was not the ancients, but the fear within our own hearts. In Antarctica, the situation escalated. The global military coalition, under a unified command, moved beyond a simple blockade. They began to see the ancient city as a strategic target. Their goal was no longer just containment, but decapitation. They believed that if they could destroy the central structure, the source of the broadcast and the energy field, they could deactivate the ancients, the connection to the global conseil, and re-establish human dominance. It was a plan born of ultimate desperation and ultimate arrogance. They assembled a new kind of weapon. A weapon developed in secret, based on the fragmented knowledge they had gleaned from decades of studying the Antarctic anomalies. It was not a nuclear bomb. They knew that would be useless against the ancients' energy field. It was a resonance weapon. A device designed to generate a specific frequency that they hoped would interfere with the crystalline structure of the ancient, causing it to shatter from within. It was humanity's most advanced technology, a child's toy, being aimed at the heart of a cosmic intelligence. The underground resistance learned of the plan. Through their own network of sympathizers within the scientific and military communities, they knew the attack was imminent. They knew that such an act of aggression against the ancients would be suicide. It would not be perceived as an act of war, but as the final spastic lashing out of a species that had chosen ignorance over wisdom. The response from the ancients, they feared, would not be retaliation, a simple final turning away, the quiet closing of a door, the end of any possibility of help or guidance before the coming cosmic storm. The resistance had to act. But how? They had no army, no weapons. Their only power was infinite. They made a final desperate gambit. They decided to broadcast a message of their own, not to the ancients, but to humanity. They hacked into the global satellite network, a feat that took every ounce of their resources, and for a few precious minutes, they seized control of every screen on the planet. Every television, every computer, every phone lit up with a single, unified message. The message was not a plea for peace. It was a presentation of evidence. They broadcast the full, unedited files from Operation High Jump. They showed Admiral Byrd's suppressed interviews. They showed the unclassified data from the Piri Reis, Phineas and Buhauer maps. They showed the leaked satellite images of the structures under the ice. And they showed the classified internal memos from the world's governments, documents that proved the leaders had known about the ancients and the cyclical nature of history for decades. They had hidden the truth not to protect humanity, but to protect their own fragile grip on power. It was the ultimate act of whistleblowing. The lie was exposed, not as a theory, but as a documented, verifiable conspiracy. For moments, the world stood still. The carefully constructed narrative of the Party of Fear shattered. The trust between the people and their leaders, already strained, was irrevocably broken. Riots erupted in major cities. Governments began to collapse. The military command structure, faced with a mutiny of conscience from within its own ranks, into chaos. A planned attack on the ancient city was put on hold, not by a command, but by the disintegration of the chain of command itself. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of the abyss, and in that moment of ultimate crisis, it had, for a brief moment, chosen truth over fear. But the victory was a fragile one. The old structures were wounded, but not dead, and the cosmic clock was still ticking. The global awakening had bought humanity a little time, a chance to change course. But the choice still remained. What would we do now? Now that we knew the truth, now that we were on our own, our old leaders exposed as liars, our old beliefs shattered. This is when the ancients finally acted, not with a weapon, not with another broadcast of data, but with an invitation. The energy field around their city shifted, a pathway opened. A single silent message was felt in the minds of every human on the planet. It was not a command, it was a question. Are you ready to learn? Humanity was at year zero. Its history was a ruin. Its future was a question mark. The old world was dead. A new, terrifying, and wondrous one was waiting. The journey to Antarctica was no longer a military or scientific expedition. It was a pilgrimage, a journey to the heart of a mystery that was now our own. The story of what happened next, of the first humans to walk the path into the city of the ancients, of the knowledge they learned, and the choice they made for the future of our species. That is a few. Story for another time. But it is a story that began on the day humanity chose to stop listening to the guardians of the lie and to start listening to the whispers from the ice. The great forgetting was over. The great remembering was about to begin. The invitation hung in the global consciousness, a silent, shimmering question mark. Are you ready to learn? For the first time in its history, humanity was united, not by a flag or a creed, but by a shared, terrifying, and wondrous state of utter confusion. The old world of nations and borders, of competing ideologies and guarded secrets, had dissolved in the face of a truth so vast, it rendered all previous conflicts meaningless. The governments that had lied to their people for generations found their authority had evaporated overnight. Trust had become the world's most valuable and rarest commodity. Out of this chaos, a new, fragile global body began to form. It was not a government. It was a council, a hastily assembled coalition of the world's most respected minds, who had not been part of the old conspiracy. Scientists who had been silenced, philosophers who had been dismissed, historians who had dared to question the official narrative, and spiritual leaders who understood that God was far bigger than the air. Our old dogmas. Their first and only order of business was to answer the ancients' invitation. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would accept. We were ready to learn. But who would go? Who could possibly represent an entire species at the threshold of a new reality? It could not be a soldier, for this was not a mission of conquest. It could not be a politician, for their words had lost all meaning. It had to be a delegation that represented not our power, but our potential. After weeks of global discussion, conducted over the decentralized networks that had once been the domain of the resistance, a small group was chosen. They were not famous. They were not powerful. They were simply the best of us. There was an elderly woman who had spent her life studying the lost proto-languages of humanity, seeking the single common tongue from which all others had sprung. There was a quantum physicist a young man who saw the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a symphony of vibrations. There was a biologist, a specialist in the life that thrives in the most extreme environments on Earth. A woman who understood that life was far more resilient and strange than we had ever imagined. There was a historian, a quiet man who had been ridiculed for his work on esoteric traditions and the cyclical nature of history. And finally, there was a child. A 10-year-old girl, chosen from a village in the Andes, chosen because her mind was still a clean slate, free from the prejudices and assumptions of a broken world. She was not there to speak, she was there to see. Their journey to Antarctica was the most watched event in human history. Every screen on the planet was tuned to the live feed from their small untransport vessel. The great military blockade was gone, replaced by a silent, international flotilla of civilian ships, keeping a respectful distance, a global audience holding a collective vigil. As the delegation ship approached the chasm in the ice, a pathway of calm, unfrozen water opened before them, leading directly to the base of the ancient city. There were no docks, no doors, no welcoming committee. There was only a silent geometric archway, a portal into the impossible structure. Carrying no weapons, no recording devices, only their own consciousness, the 5 representatives of humanity walked the path and stepped across the threshold, leaving their old world behind. The moment they entered the city of the ancients, the concepts of space and time as we know them dissolved. There were no corridors, no rooms, no physical structures. They found themselves floating in a vast internal cosmos of light, sound, and pure information. It was not a place they saw with their eyes, one they experienced with the entirety of their being. The city was not a place they saw with their eyes, but one they experienced with the entirety of their being. A library of worlds. The ancients did not speak to them. There was no need for the clumsy, limited tool of language. They simply opened a door in their own collective memory and invited the delegation to step inside. And in that instant, the 5 humans experienced a flood of knowledge so profound, it would take the rest of humanity 1,000 years to fully comprehend. They witnessed the birth of the solar system, not as a theory, but as a direct experience. They felt the cooling of the earth, the formation of its first oceans, the spark of its first life. And they learned the truth of their own world's history. They experienced the rise and fall of civilization after civilization, stretching back through epochs of time that made our own recorded history seem like a single heartbeat. They saw civilizations of beings who had mastered the oceans, building cities that floated on the water. They saw a civilization of silicon-based life that lived deep within the Earth's crust. They saw a race of winged humanoids who built their nests on the peaks of mountains that were now long eroded into dust. Each civilization rose to incredible heights. Each mastered a different aspect of reality, biology, physics, consciousness itself, and each, in its turn, was cleansed from the surface of the planet by the great cosmic cycle. The delegation learned that the cycle was not a punishment or a flaw in the universe. It was the universe's natural rhythm, the pulse of creation and destruction that allows for infinite renewal. The universe, they understood, did not care for the survival of any single form of life. It cared only for the continuation of consciousness itself, the eternal spark of awareness that learns from each cycle. And they learned the true purpose of the ancients. They were not gods. They were not rulers. Their name for themselves, in a concept that transcended language, was the librarians, the share of memory. An ancient order, born on a world long since vanished, whose sole purpose was to travel the cosmos and preserve the essence of life before each cyclical cleansing. They were the galaxy's memory keepers. The Ark in Antarctica was not their only one. There were others on other worlds, in other systems, each a silent library holding the soul of a lost civilization. The ancients' delegation the final days of their own world, the one that had existed on Antarctica. They had known the cataclysm was coming. They had not tried to stop it. They knew that would be like a single cell trying to stop the aging of a body. Instead, they had spent their final centuries building the Ark. They had not tried to save their bodies, their cities, their technology. They had worked to distill the very essence of their consciousness, their arts, their music, their understanding of love and sorrow into a pure, energetic form. They had preserved their soul, not their flesh, and then, in the final moments of the broadcast inside their minds, the ancients offered humanity the same they themselves had once faced. The cosmic cycle was returning. The solar system was moving into a new energetic alignment. The planet's crust would shift. A new ice age would descend upon some parts of the world, while the ice of Antarctica would melt, giving birth to a new sea. The surface of the world would be washed clean. This, they communicated, was inevitable. It could not be fought. It could not be stopped. But the essence of humanity, they explained, could be saved. They offered to teach us how to build an ark of our own, not a physical ship to escape into the stars, but a conscious one, a library of memory, a place where the best of what it meant to be human, our stories, our songs, our irrational kindness, our capacity for hope in the face of despair, could be preserved. They were offering to help us save our soul. They were not offering to save our species. That, they communicated with a sense of profound and ancient sadness, was a choice we had to make for ourselves. We could spend our final years fighting a war against the inevitable, consumed by fear and clinging to the illusion of control, and vanish completely, leaving not even an echo behind. Or we could spend our final years in a grand, unified act of remembrance, a project to preserve the light of our own brief, beautiful, chaotic candle before it was extinguished by the cosmic wind. The invitation was an offer of immortality, but not the kind we had ever conceived of. When the members of the delegation returned from the city of the ancients, the world saw it on their faces. They had not been gone for weeks. In the timeless realm of the ancient library, they had experienced eons. They had witnessed the birth and death of worlds. They looked older, their eyes filled with a sorrow and a wisdom that was no longer entirely human. They did not need to speak. The essence of what they had learned was broadcast from their own consciousness, a gentle, powerful wave of understanding that washed over the planet. And humanity, for the first time in its history, made a single, unified choice. We would not fight. We would remember. The great global project began. It was not a project of engineering or technology, but of art and soul. The world's armies were disbanded, their resources redirected. The world's economies, no longer driven by the pursuit of profit, were retooled for the sole purpose of creation and preservation. In every city, every town, every village, people gathered. They told their stories. They sang their songs. They painted their pictures. They recorded the feeling of a child's laughter, the taste of rain, the warmth of the sun on the skin, the quiet, aching beauty of a sunset. Musicians composed their final symphonies. Poets wrote their final verses. Scientists wrote not of weapons, but of the elegant beauty of the laws of nature. It was the most productive and creative period in the history of the seas. A frantic, beautiful explosion of life and expression in the face of certain death. Every human being became an artist, a librarian of their own small, precious experience. This vast collection of memory, of soul, was not stored on computers or in books. Following the guidance of the ancients, humanity learned to encode it into the very resonant frequency of the planet itself, creating a new, invisible conscious arc. A human dream preserved in the Earth's magnetic field. And what of the old guardians, the party of fear? Stripped of their power and their narrative, they became irrelevant ghosts, haunting the ruins of their own broken world. Some of them, unable to let go of their desire for control, mounted a final, pathetic assault on the Antarctic city, trying to seize the ancients' technology for themselves. The ancients did not retaliate. They did not even defend themselves. The resonance weapons of the old guard simply passed through the crystalline walls of the city as if they were not there. The ancients' reality was no longer on the same frequency as humanity's violence. The would-be conquerors were not defeated. They were simply rendered meaningless. They were shouting at a hurricane, their anger and their fear just another whisper in the wind. Humanity had found a new purpose, not to survive, but to be worthy of being remembered. The fear did not vanish completely. The sadness was immense, but it was a clean sadness, a noble sadness. It was the sorrow of saying goodbye to something beautiful. We had learned the final and most important lesson of the ancients. The ultimate act of living is to create something that will outlast your own death. And so, we spent our final days not building bunkers, but planting gardens. Not weapons, but writing poems. We were preparing our soul for its longing into the memory of the cosmos. And as we stand now at the very end of this long story, a journey that has taken us from dusty maps to impossible technologies, from ruins to the very soul of our species, we are left with a fear. Now, echoey question. The mystery of Antarctica was never truly about what was under the ice. It was about what is inside of us. It was a story that forced us to confront our own history, our own identity, and our own capacity for fear and for wisdom. The ancients did not provide us with an answer for our future. They simply held up a mirror to our past and asked us to choose what we would become. Our story ends here, with humanity united in a final, noble act of creation. We do not see the cataclysm. We do not see the end. We see only the moment of choice. The moment humanity decided to turn from fear to love, from power to memory. But as this story fades, the questions it has raised do not belong to the past. They belong to you now. You live in a world of comfortable stories, of approved histories, of secrets guarded not by ice, but by silence and distraction. You are told who you are, where you came from, and where you are going. But are those stories true? The greatest mysteries are not buried under miles of Antarctic ice. They are buried under layers of assumption in our own minds. The most powerful conspiracies are not managed by a shadowy global elite, but by our own unwillingness to ask uncomfortable questions. The journey to the truth does not require a transport ship to the South Pole. It requires only the courage to your own world and ask, Is this all there is? To question the official narrative, to seek the lost chapters of your own history, to listen for the whispers that are drowned out by the noise of our civilization. If this journey into the great white mystery has awakened something in you, if it has made you question what you thought you knew, then the purpose of this story is not over. It has just begun. The next expedition is yours to command. The next secret is yours to uncover. Do not let the guardians of silence win. Never stop asking questions. Never stop seeking the truth that lies just beyond the edges of our approved reality. The ancients asked humanity if it was ready to learn, and now this story asks the same of you. If you are, then this is not the end. It is only the beginning of a much larger and more wondrous journey.